In a surprising move, former President Donald Trump reveals shocking information live on air, implicating billionaire philanthropist George Soros in an alleged global manipulation scheme. The studio audience is stunned as Trump exits, leaving everyone in disbelief. This revelation could have far-reaching consequences. The atmosphere was tense, like a storm about to break. It was an ordinary Tuesday morning, and Americans tuned in expecting a routine update from former President Donald Trump, but something was different. Trump's expression was stern, his eyes burning with quiet intensity. He stood behind the podium, holding a thick folder, no teleprompter or script in sight. "Ladies and gentlemen," Trump began, his voice steady, "what I'm about to reveal will shake the foundations of our country and the world." A chill swept through living rooms across America. Families sat frozen, coffee cups trembling in their hands. Even the news anchors on set were visibly nervous, exchanging worried glances. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance as if the city itself could feel the weight of what was coming. No one could have prepared for this. Trump opened the folder. Slowly, camera zooming in. Inside were photographs, letters, and documents stamped confidential. Then he said it. "George Soros is behind it all." Gasps filled the studio. The name alone sent shockwaves through the room. George Soros, a man whispered about in powerful circles, now called out live before the entire world. Trump's voice grew heavier, deeper with conviction. For years, this man has spent billions to create chaos, not only here in America but across Europe too. Fake refugee crises, paid protesters, all designed to destabilize our nations. He held up photos of crowded boats and protesters holding identical signs. "My team has uncovered bank records," Trump revealed, slapping a stack of papers onto the podium. "Massive transfers, hidden accounts, dark money funding protests against my administration, paying for violence and destruction." People watching at home covered their mouths in disbelief. Some wept, others shook their heads, unable to process what they were hearing. The camera cut to the anchors. One had tears in her eyes, the other was frozen like a statue. Outside the studio, a crowd was gathering, whispering, trembling. Trump wasn't finished. He pointed directly at the camera, at the people. "And this is only the beginning." The studio lights flickered slightly, as if overwhelmed by the moment. Trump's eyes narrowed, his gaze sharp as steel. He leaned closer to the microphone. "I carry a heavy burden," he confessed, his voice thick with emotion. "For months, my team and I have chased shadows, hunted for proof, and faced threats like you wouldn't believe. They tried to stop me, to bury this, but I refused to be silenced." He paused, gathering the weight of his next words. "They tried to stop me, but I refused to be silenced." Trump lifted a sheet of paper, hands steady. It showed wire transfers from shadowy accounts linked to Soros's foundations. The amounts were staggering. "These funds were used," Trump explained slowly, "to destabilize our democracy, to pay agitators, to create fake crises that are destroying our cities, our towns, our families." The camera panned across the silent, tearful studio audience. At home, viewers clutched their chests, feeling an ache deep inside. Betrayal, fear, sadness, all at once. "My fellow Americans," Trump declared, his voice rising with strength, "I will not let this continue. I will fight for you, for your children, for our future." The room erupted in quiet sobs, but deep inside, everyone knew the story was only beginning. For a full minute, no one in the studio spoke, not a whisper, not a breath. The silence was so deep it felt like time itself had frozen. Trump's words hung in the air like thunderclouds. Even the reporters, known for jumping in with sharp questions, sat motionless, their eyes wide as if they had seen a ghost. Behind the cameras, producers frantically whispered, unsure if they should cut the feed. But it was too late. Millions were already watching, and millions more were joining by the second on social media. Hashtags exploded. Trump exposes Soros. Global fraud revealed. At home, families wept, their faith in justice finally restored. Elderly veterans sat forward in their chairs, their trembling hands pressed together in prayer. And in the studio, Trump stood tall, his shoulders squared. He had just opened a door that could never be closed. The American people deserve to know the truth, he had said, and now there was no turning back. Somewhere in the shadows of the studio, a quiet figure picked up a phone. Orders were being given. Trump knew they would come after him for this, but he had no fear in his heart. He cleared his throat and held up another document, his hands firm, his voice calm but powerful. "Here is the smoking gun," he announced. Wire transfers from George Soros' foundations to shell companies, which then paid organizers of violent protests both in America and Europe. He flipped the paper toward the cameras so the whole world could see. Dates, account numbers, names of companies no one had ever heard of, yet now exposed under the harsh light of truth. One line on the document read, "Payment for agitation services, $2,500,000. Gasps filled the studio. One of the cameramen, an older man with silver hair, wiped away a tear that had slipped down his cheek. These protests weren't organic, Trump explained, his voice steady. They were bought and paid for, designed to tear apart our families, our streets, our peace. In living rooms across America, husbands hugged their wives, mothers wept for their children's future. This is not about politics anymore, Trump said firmly. This is about saving the soul of our country." And with those words, the weight of the moment grew heavier. But Trump was not finished yet, not even close. He took a deep breath, as if preparing to lift an even heavier burden off his chest. "I know many of you feel betrayed," he said softly, "and you should." The room grew even more silent, if that was possible. Even the ticking of the studio clock seemed to stop. "Families torn apart by false hope," he continued. "Our streets flooded with fake refugees, coached and funded by Soros himself to create a crisis where there was none." He showed more documents, fake refugee applications with identical wording, across thousands of cases, pictures of buses lined up ready to deliver paid protesters to cities already on edge. "This wasn't an accident," Trump declared. "It was a plan." The camera caught a tear rolling down the cheek of a young mother in the audience. She covered her mouth with her hand, her shoulders shaking. Trump's eyes softened, but his resolve hardened. "I swore an oath to protect this country," he said, "and I will not let a global puppet master destroy it." At that moment, America and the world saw not just a former president, but a warrior for truth. And somewhere far away, the puppet master himself watched nervously. The storm had only begun. Trump continued, holding up a chilling set of photographs. These weren't random images. They were faces, real people, real lives caught in Soros's shadowy web. He pointed to a man pretending to be a refugee but tracked to a luxury hotel fully paid for by Soros's groups. The image zoomed in on the man smiling next to stacks of cash. "And this young woman," Trump added, lifting another photo, "was paid to cry for cameras to spark outrage, to make America look heartless." The studio audience gasped. People at home, especially the older viewers, felt their hearts ache with betrayal. They had watched these stories on the news, prayed for these faces, donated to help. Now they saw the ugly truth. "My friends," Trump said, his voice thick with emotion, "you were tricked. We all were." The weight of deception settled over the room like a dark cloud. People wiped their tears, shaking their heads in disbelief. "But I promise you," Trump continued, his hand over his heart, "I will end this for you, for every American family." For the first time, a flicker of hope returned to their eyes. Trump took a slow breath, steadying himself. "It's not just protests or fake refugees," he revealed. "It's a chain of lies stretching from city streets to global power rooms." He held up a detailed chart, lines connecting Soros's organizations to foreign companies, media outlets, and political activists. It looked like a spider's web. "Every line you see here," Trump explained, "is a pathway of corruption." He tapped one line with his finger. "Here's a Soros-backed fund that paid for journalists to twist the truth against our administration." He tapped another. "And here's where millions were funneled into violent demonstrations staged to scare good Americans into silence." Viewers at home sat stunned, Grandparents shook their heads, tears in their eyes, realizing how deeply they had been manipulated. Trump's voice grew firm. They wanted you to feel helpless, he said. They wanted you to believe there was no way out. He paused, looking directly into the camera. But they were wrong. A swell of emotion filled the studio. Even the doubters felt their walls begin to crack. Truth is stronger than lies, Trump declared, and in that moment, hope flickered like a candle refusing to be snuffed out. Outside the studio, something incredible was happening. People were pouring into the streets not to protest, but to pray, to stand together. American flags waved high in the early morning sun. Elderly veterans saluted. Mothers held their children tight, tears streaming down their cheeks. Inside, Trump could feel it. He could feel the heartbeat of a nation rising. They thought we were weak, Trump said, lifting another file from the folder. But they forgot. Americans never back down. He revealed new documents, emails, secret messages between Soros's agents and foreign operatives. These messages showed plans to keep borders open, to flood towns, to drown voices under waves of false stories. The room filled with a heavy silence. Cameras captured the glistening eyes of proud patriots in the crowd. They underestimated our spirit, Trump continued. They thought money and lies could break us. He looked up, his voice now full of quiet power. But America cannot be bought. At home, viewers wept openly. Some whispered prayers, others clenched their fists in quiet determination. The storm was gathering, but this time it was not a storm of fear. It was a storm of truth. Back at the White House after the broadcast, Trump met with his most trusted advisors. The mood was heavy. Papers were spread across the long table. Emails, bank statements, secret memos. The truth was all there, but there was one document that made even the bravest advisors' hands tremble. It showed a direct connection. George Soros' foundation had been secretly funding campaigns to push for open borders in America and Europe. Billions of dollars disguised as charity flowed like rivers of poison. This is it, Trump said firmly. This is what they've been hiding from us. One of his generals, an older man with silver stars on his shoulders, shook his head in disbelief. Sir, this goes deeper than we thought. Trump's eyes darkened with resolve. No matter how deep it goes, we dig it all out. Outside the White House, crowds were growing, but they were not angry. They were hopeful. People were waving flags, holding signs that read, "Thank you, Mr. President." And deep inside, Trump knew this was not just a battle for politics. It was a battle for the soul of America, and he would not lose. Trump's team began mapping every secret connection. The deeper they looked, the darker it became. Money had moved across continents from Soros's accounts in Europe to hidden trusts in the Caribbean, then to organizations operating right in the heart of America's cities. These groups paid for fake rallies, fake news stories, even fake social media accounts to spread lies. Trump stood before the map, his face filled with quiet determination. They created a shadow world, he said softly. A world built to fool good people. One of his aides, a young woman who had grown up in a small town, felt tears fill her eyes. Sir, she whispered, my family, we believed in some of these stories. Trump placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. That's what they wanted, he replied gently. They wanted to break your spirit. The aide wiped her tears, her voice growing stronger. But they failed, sir. Trump nodded. Yes, they did. As the sun set over Washington, D.C., the shadows grew longer, but for the first time in a long time, there was light pushing through. And Trump, with the whole nation behind him, was ready to expose every last lie. Across the ocean, in a dark office, George Soros watched the news unfold, his face tight with concern. For years he had moved like a ghost, pulling strings behind curtains. But now, Trump had ripped those curtains open. His phone rang nonstop, advisors panicking, operatives begging for guidance. But Soros said nothing. He simply watched as Trump, live on national TV again, held up the latest evidence. This, Trump said clearly, lifting another document, proves that Soros paid millions to flood America with false refugee claims using innocent families as pawns. The studio audience gasped. Viewers at home wept, hands covering their faces. Trump continued, his voice full of strength. They exploited good people's kindness. They lied to mothers and fathers, made them fear their own country was lost. A grandmother watching from her small living room clutched a flag to her chest, tears streaming down her cheeks. Trump's eyes glowed with determination. "We are better than this," he declared. "America is stronger than their lies." And somewhere far away, Soros's silence spoke louder than words. The walls of deceit were beginning to crumble. The nation waited as the news spread. Families across America gathered around their TVs. It felt like history was unfolding right in their living rooms. "I always knew something wasn't right," an old veteran whispered to his wife, tears filling his eyes. He had fought for the flag waving proudly outside their home, and now he felt its meaning deeper than ever. Trump appeared on the screen again, his voice calm but burning with passion. "We have more," he announced. "We discovered that Soros funneled money through fake charities, all pretending to help refugees, but they were lies to flood our borders." He held up a photo of a supposed charity warehouse filled with protest signs instead of food. Shockwaves rippled across the nation. People clutched their hearts, some cried openly, feeling betrayed, yet thankful for the truth finally being exposed. Trump's eyes softened as he addressed the people directly. "This was never about politics. This was about you, your safety, your family, your country." In that moment, he wasn't just a former president. He was their protector. The floodgates of truth had opened, and there was no closing them now. Trump took a moment to recognize the unsung heroes. "My fellow Americans," he began, "I want you to know. Brave patriots behind the scenes risked everything to uncover this truth." He held up a photo of a young analyst, her tired eyes showing sleepless nights. She had combed through thousands of financial records to connect the dots. Another image showed a whistleblower, a middle-aged father of 3 who had slipped documents to Trump's team at great personal risk. "They stood in the shadows so that I can stand here in the light," Trump said, his voice full of gratitude. The studio audience rose to their feet, clapping, some weeping. At home, families watching felt their hearts swell with pride. These weren't nameless agents. They were everyday Americans who loved their country enough to fight for it. Trump paused, his eyes glistening with emotion. "This is what makes our nation great," he said. "Not money, not power, but the courage of everyday people standing up for truth." For a moment, across every home, every city, and every small town, America stood united, and it was beautiful. Far away, Soros's inner circle was in chaos. Phones rang endlessly. Emails flew back and forth in panic. "We didn't expect him to find everything," a frantic voice cried. But Trump had found it all. In the studio, Trump displayed the final piece of proof for the day, a recording of Soros's operatives discussing plans to fund riots in American cities. Their voices were clear as day, plotting to burn down businesses and frighten families. Trump's face grew serious. "They wanted fear to rule our streets," he said, "but I have chosen a different path, the path of courage." The audience erupted in cheers. At home, viewers clapped through tears, their hope rekindled. Trump raised his hand to quiet the room. "This is not over," he promised. "This is only the beginning. Tomorrow I will reveal more. We will expose every shadow they hide in." And with steady steps, Trump walked off the stage. The studio was left frozen, breathless. Across America, hearts beat faster, knowing that tomorrow could change everything. The storm of truth was far from over. It was just beginning. The next morning felt different. America woke up to a heavy sky but a lighter heart. Across towns and cities, people stood in long lines to buy newspapers. Every front page carried Trump's explosive revelation. "Former President Trump exposes Soros's global web," the headlines screamed. Families gathered at breakfast tables, eyes glued to the TV. Seniors in retirement homes wept softly, whispering, "Finally, someone stood up for us." Trump prepared for the second day of revelations. He stood by the window of the Oval Office, looking out at the flag waving proudly in the breeze. His chief of staff entered quietly. "Mr. President, the world is watching." Trump turned, determination in his eyes. "Good," he replied. "Let them see the truth." At that moment, millions of people across America and Europe shared the same feeling: hope. Trump stepped onto the stage again, holding new files in his hands. "My fellow Americans," he began, "yesterday I showed you how they used money to manipulate you." He held up a thick folder. "Today, I show you their blueprints for destruction." And just like that, the entire nation held its breath once more. Trump opened the folder carefully. Inside were plans, real printed blueprints with Soros's funding trails leading straight into planned operations against peaceful cities. "These," Trump explained, showing a marked-up city map, "are locations Soros's groups targeted for riots: churches, schools, veteran memorials." The camera zoomed in, capturing every detail. Every American watching felt their chest tighten, tears filling their eyes. "They weren't just attacking buildings," Trump said, his voice thick with emotion. "They were attacking our spirit, our history, our future." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "I know many of you have felt helpless," Trump continued. "You watched your towns burn, your loved ones scared, and you wondered, why is no one stopping this?" He looked straight into the camera. "Today, we stop it right here, right now." Across the country, people stood to their feet. Some cried openly. Veterans saluted their TVs. Mothers hugged their children tighter. Trump's courage had given them something they thought they had lost: hope. And as Trump placed the blueprint on the podium, his message was clear. The enemy had been exposed, and now justice was coming. Trump's voice grew stronger, filled with energy that stirred the soul of every listener. "As we speak," he declared, "law enforcement is moving in. Raids are underway across the nation." He lifted a fresh document, names, locations, bank accounts frozen. The studio erupted in stunned silence. Families at home watched, tears streaming, as relief washed over them. After so much fear, so much pain, justice was finally being served. Trump continued, "We are shutting down their operations. We are freezing their blood money. We are reclaiming our nation block by block, heart by heart." Crowds outside the White House cheered, waving flags and singing the national anthem. Even hardened news anchors wiped their eyes on live TV. Trump's final words for the day were powerful. "This is not the end," he promised. "This is the beginning of a new chapter, one of truth, courage, and freedom." He placed the last document down, and without another word, walked off the stage. The studio remained frozen. The world launched, in awe. And in homes across America, hearts beat, and tears of joy flowed. The storm of truth had become a hurricane of justice. As Trump's words echoed across the nation, something beautiful happened. People didn't just listen, they stood up. All across America, from small towns to big cities, crowds gathered in the streets, not in protest, but in unity. They held hands, waved flags, and prayed together. At a tiny church in rural Ohio, an elderly pastor, his eyes wet with tears, led a prayer. "Lord, thank you for giving us a leader brave enough to speak the truth." Trump's team watched the scenes from the White House Situation Room, their hearts swelling with pride. "Mr. President," his aide said softly, "the nation is behind you." Trump, standing tall, gave a determined nod. "This is bigger than me," he replied. "This is about every American who was lied to, who was hurt, who was scared." Meanwhile, the arrests continued quietly across the country. Soros's hidden network was unraveling faster than anyone expected. But Trump knew this was not yet the finish line. More truth remained buried, and he was ready to dig it out with the people by his side. Victory felt closer than ever. Day 5 of the revelations began with an earthquake of truth. Trump walked confidently to the podium, holding yet another folder in his hands. The room fell silent. "My fellow Americans," he began, his voice steady, "what I will reveal today will expose the puppeteers pulling the strings." He opened the folder, showing a list of names, celebrities, politicians, media personalities, all secretly connected to Soros's network. They smiled on TV, Trump said, pretending to care about you. But behind closed doors, they took millions to lie, to push fear, to divide us. The crowd outside the White House erupted in chants of, USA! USA! Families at home wept. Grandfathers, who fought in wars, felt tears in their eyes, seeing the truth laid bare. Trump's voice cracked with emotion. They sold their voices to spread Soros's lies, but today, the truth sets us free. He showed another document, payments to media outlets, to bury stories of Soros's crimes. At that moment, Americans realized they were not crazy for doubting the news. They had been right all along, and their former president had their back. Trump's courage burned brighter than ever, and the world was watching. The atmosphere across America was electric. For the first time in years, people felt hope in their hearts. Tears flowed freely, not tears of sadness, but of awakening. In a small diner in Pennsylvania, an old man stood up and saluted the TV as Trump spoke. "That's my president," he said, his voice trembling. Trump's next words shook the nation, even harder. "We found the contracts," he declared. Soros's organization signed deals to keep the border crisis alive. Fake refugees were coached, transported, and funded, all to make America look weak. Gasps filled the studio. People clung to each other at home, overwhelmed. Trump continued, holding a signed agreement high in the air. "This paper proves they paid to turn our towns into chaos." Cameras caught the moment perfectly, a symbol of truth triumphing over lies. Around the country, church bells rang, people cheered, and prayers of thanks filled the air. But Trump wasn't finished. "There's more," he promised, eyes burning with resolve. "Tomorrow we reveal the final piece." The nation held its breath. The storm of truth was about to reach its peak, and America was ready. The fifth day was barely breaking, but Trump was already at the White House Situation Room, studying reports, coming in from across the nation. "Mr. President," an aide said breathlessly, "raids are complete. We've frozen over 100 Soros-linked accounts." Trump's eyes narrowed with determination. "Good," he replied, "but we're not done yet." That afternoon, Trump addressed the nation once more. The American flag stood tall behind him, and pride filled his chest. "My fellow Americans," Trump began, "Soros's empire is falling apart." He held up a photo, pallets of cash seized in a hidden warehouse, funds meant to pay for more chaos. "This money was meant to fuel lies," Trump declared, "but it will now be returned to the American people." The beast. Crowd outside the White House roared with joy. At home, families cried tears of relief. For too long, they had lived in fear. Now they saw hope. Trump's voice softened, full of emotion. "We were deceived, but we are not broken." The web of lies was collapsing fast, but Trump knew the biggest truth was still to come. Tomorrow, he would reveal Soros's most shocking secret of all. Trump's team had discovered something even darker inside the recovered files. They found evidence that Soros's network had been secretly paying off trusted American officials. Officials sworn to protect the people had instead betrayed them. Trump's heart ached as he read the names. Some were people he had once trusted. At that moment, he wasn't just a former president. He was a man carrying the weight of an entire nation's pain. Stepping up to the podium once again, he spoke with raw honesty. "Today is one of the hardest days of my life," Trump admitted, his voice cracking, "because I must tell you that some among us people meant to defend you chose money over loyalty." Gasps filled the air. Tears rolled down cheeks. In living rooms across the country. But Trump continued firmly, "They have been removed from power, and they will face justice." The people cheered, but their emotions were bittersweet. Betrayal stung, but justice soothed their wounds. Trump ended the speech with powerful words. "We may have been betrayed, but we will never be defeated." As the sun set, hearts across America burned with both sorrow and pride. The final truth was coming. Trump stood in the Oval Office, looking out over the Washington Monument. Tomorrow would be the biggest day of all, but tonight he had a warning to deliver. Not to the people, but to the architects of chaos still hiding in the shadows. In a televised address watched by billions worldwide, Trump looked straight into the camera, his voice sharp like steel. To those who funded the fear, who spread the lies, and who tried to destroy our great nation, he declared, your time is up. He held up a thick document, an international warrant for the arrest of George Soros. This man, Trump said firmly, will face justice not only for America, but for every nation he tried to poison. Viewers everywhere erupted into tears and cheers. Elderly couples hugged each other tightly. Veterans saluted with trembling hands. Children clapped along with their parents, even if they didn't fully understand. They felt the victory. Trump's eyes softened, and he spoke to the people's hearts. Stay strong, my fellow Americans. Tomorrow, we close this chapter together. Across the land, a powerful feeling rose, hope. The end of the storm was near. It was the night before the final revelation. Inside the White House, lights burned bright long past midnight. Trump sat at his desk, documents spread before him, a pen in hand. But this wasn't paperwork for politics. This was the paperwork for justice. Mr. President, an aide spoke gently. The people are waiting. The world is waiting. Trump looked up, his face filled with a quiet fire. Tomorrow, they will have their answer. Outside, crowds camped overnight in front of the White House gates. Fathers held their children close. Grandmothers clutched small American flags to their hearts, whispering prayers into the cool night air. It wasn't just a political moment anymore. It had become something much deeper. A fight for the soul of the nation. Across Europe, too, people watched. Tears welled in their eyes as they realized they had been trapped by the same lies. Trump was not only fighting for America, but for them as well. As dawn approached, Trump rose from his desk. He walked to the window and gazed out at the awakening city. This is for you, he whispered to the people and the world holding its breath, prepared for the day that would change everything. The sun rose slowly over Washington, D.C., painting the sky in gold. It was the 6th day of the revelations, and it felt as if the whole world had come to a stop. Trump stood before the cameras, steady and strong, his voice filled with quiet power. Today, he began, we finish what we started. He lifted a final thick folder. Inside were contracts, emails, even handwritten notes. Undeniable proof that George Soros had funded not only protests, but chaos worldwide. Here is the truth. They never wanted you to see, Trump declared, holding the documents high. Gasps filled the studio. People at home wept openly, clutching their families close. Trump showed one letter signed by Soros himself. Keep the border crisis alive at all costs. Trump's voice trembled not with fear but with passion. They sold out your safety for their power. Cheers erupted across the nation. Church bells rang in small towns. Strangers hugged in the streets. Trump's final words that day were simple yet powerful. America belongs to the people, not to the puppeteers. With that, he placed the folder on the podium and walked away. But this time, he didn't walk alone. He walked with the spirit of a grateful nation. As Trump stepped away from the podium, the nation exploded in celebration. Flags waved from every window, bells tolled across the country, tears flowed as families embraced, feeling hope like they hadn't felt in years. Mr. President, a reporter called out, voice shaking with emotion, what do you say to the American people at this moment of victory? Trump turned, his eyes filled with pride and gratitude. I say this, you are the true heroes. Your prayers, your strength, your love for this nation carried us through. Across the nation, people wept harder. It was not sadness, it was relief, it was pride, it was freedom. Veterans saluted their TVs, farmers paused in their fields to give thanks. Children held their parents' hands tightly, feeling something they didn't fully understand but knew was important. Trump's final message that day burned into the hearts of millions. This victory belongs to every American, not just today, but forever. As night fell, Fireworks lit up the sky. For the first time in too long, the stars and stripes waved over a land filled with hope, courage, and unity. And deep in their hearts, people knew the storm had passed. The dawn had come. The sun had barely risen when the news broke across every screen, every channel. The headline flashed in bold letters: Soros arrested, Operation Liberty triumphs. Live footage showed George Soros, once the untouchable puppet master, being led away in handcuffs by international agents. His face, once full of confidence, now pale with defeat. Cheers erupted across America. Tears flooded the eyes of millions. Elderly veterans saluted. Mothers held their children, whispering, "Justice, at last." Inside the White House, Trump watched the moment unfold with quiet strength. "This is for every American who felt voiceless," he said softly. Crowds outside the White House gates cheered so loud it shook the streets. They chanted Trump's name with pride and love. At home, families who had suffered sleepless nights of fear finally felt peace. Trump stepped out onto the balcony, waving to the people. Their roar grew louder, flags waved high, faces were wet with joyful tears. History had been made, and it was not just America that celebrated. Across Europe, streets filled with people singing songs of freedom. A storm had passed, but the dawn of justice had only just begun. The day after Soros's arrest felt like a rebirth for America. Church bells rang from coast to coast. Small towns held parades. Veterans led marches down main streets. Children waved flags and sang the national anthem with bright, tear-filled eyes. Trump addressed the nation one final time, standing tall. He spoke straight from the heart. "My fellow Americans, we faced a storm that threatened to tear us apart, but together we stood strong. We uncovered the truth. We reclaimed our nation." His words carried weight, landing deep in the souls of every listener. Our streets are safe again, our voices are free again, and our future is bright once more. In living rooms across America, families cried openly. They had lived through fear, through lies, but now they felt unity stronger than ever. Trump continued, "Never again will outside forces control our fate. We the people will write our own story." People hugged strangers. Veterans wept openly in the streets. The land breathed a collective sigh of relief. This wasn't just a victory. It was a new beginning. Trump smiled warmly and, with pride, closed his final address with words that would be remembered forever. God bless you. God bless America. As the sun set on the seventh day, America stood taller than ever. Trump, looking out over the peaceful crowds, felt the weight of history lifting from his shoulders. The nation was free, the people were awake, and justice had been served. He turned to the cameras one last time, knowing the whole world was watching. "My fellow patriots," he said, his voice full of warmth, "this victory belongs to you." He paused, then spoke words that touched every heart watching. "You cried for truth, and it came. You prayed for justice, and it arrived. You stood tall, and together we changed the world." His eyes glistened as he continued, "Let this be a reminder. When we stand united, nothing is impossible." Crowds across the nation erupted into cheers, their tears flowing freely. Elderly men and women, veterans, mothers, fathers, children, all wept with gratitude. Then, with a knowing smile, Trump spoke directly to the viewers and to all watching. "This story unfold. If your heart was moved, if you believe in truth, in courage, in justice, don't just watch. Stand with us. Like this video, leave your thoughts in the comments, and most of all, subscribe to this channel to keep the flame of freedom burning." He raised his hand and saluted. "Together, we are unstoppable." As the screen faded to the waving flag, one message remained. Truth wins, freedom lives, and our story continues.